video game industry has an infectious disease, and since 1987, that disease has been hideously understated as having a detrimental impact on our society. I'm referring, of course, to the infamous and notorious hidden danger known as... You're the infectious disease! It's all your fault the industry's like this! And mine to a lesser extent, but it was mostly you!
It's all your fault! All your fault!
You suck! Back in the 90s, video games were seen as nothing more than a meaningless pastime for children. In a lot of ways they still are, but back then, nobody, and I mean, well, not a lot of people, I guess. Very few people saw video games as having the potential to tell deep, compelling stories. John Carmack, co-founder of id Software, was famously quoted as saying, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." That all changed in 1998 when Metal Gear Solid was released for the PlayStation, knocking the entire world on its ass like the $2 Grand Slam at Denny's.
$1.99? Are you out of your mind?
In a world where video games did nothing but rot your brains, one man dared to defy expectations. A man who failed to become a filmmaker, joined a video game company because he needed a job, then spent the next few decades taking out his resentment on the gullible masses. That man's name was...
Oh man, I am gonna feel that in the morning. Let's hurry up and get this out of the way so you can get to clicking that dislike button. Hideo Kojima is complete garbage, okay? That dude is one of the worst things to happen in video games, and it's all cause of you he turned out that way. For all the people that saw my Metal Gear videos, a lot of you guys must be thinking, I do not understand. Does the Mega Destroy bastard not cherish the Kojima-san as we do? Fuck no, that dude is walking talking bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, but why though?
Before his new studio had shown anything to the public, they were already selling mugs and t-shirts with his name on it, just to celebrate the fact that it existed. Granted, a lot of game developers sell merch with their logos on it. Check out this Blizzard hat. Pretty stylish, huh? Ooh, look at that Double Fine shirt. Very nice. But how many game studios have you ever heard of that have a fucking collector's edition? If you ever see a studio selling hats and shit, they built their fan base over time by consistently proving they can make quality stuff. The new Kojima Productions is completely unproven, but people are already treating it like it's the best thing since RedTube just because this guy's name is attached to it.
Did you like it?
Kojima being turned into a brand name, that's fine, I guess, cause I actually like the idea of gamers wearing hats and shirts of their favorite game developers the same way frat boys wear jerseys of their favorite athletes. So that's not the worst thing in the world. No, the worst thing in the world is Hideo Kojima being worshipped as a god. Because the way the industry treats Kojima is indistinguishable from a religion.
I don't believe it. Kojima is God. Kojima is God.
This motherfucker really just sat up here and called himself a god in his own game. That's the most narcissistic shit I ever heard in my whole life.
Who does he think he is? I just told you who I thought I was. A god. I just told you.
And this is coming from somebody who used to worship Kojima as a god. But I escaped the Church of Kojesus. And now it's my mission to prevent others from falling into the same trap I did all those years ago. Most people aren't gonna make it this far in the video. I'm gonna get a bunch of comments from people telling me how stupid I am, why I should kill myself, how I should kill myself, and why Kojima's earned his place on top of the pedestal he's been placed on because he's a creative genius, blah blah blah. If you've decided to stick around to hear my explanation, I'm sure you're wondering how I can badmouth Kojima despite his obvious contributions to the video game industry. And my answer to that is, wait, what contributions? Without a doubt, Metal Gear Solid paved the way for the cinematic storytelling techniques we see in video games today. But people have a terrible habit of attributing the success of a project to a single person. Sure, Kojima might have sat in the director's chair, but the finished product has always been put together by a huge team of writers and designers. I get comments all the time from people praising Kojima for coming up with Metal Gear Solid's amazing narrative. People go so far as to call it the greatest story in video game history. Here's the thing about that. Kojima's never worked alone on the stories for the Metal Gear Solid games. Tomokazu Fukushima worked as a writer on the Metal Gear series for over a decade, starting with MGS1 and finishing strong with MGS3. During that time, he also wrote the stories for Metal Gear Ghost Babel on the Game Boy Color and Metal Gear Acid for the PSP. Sometime around 2006, though, Fukushima spontaneously left Kojima Productions, then dropped off the face of the earth. Judging by the limited information I was able to find, this guy's a total ghost, maybe even literally. He pretty much disappeared out of nowhere during the development of MGS4, leading a lot of people to wonder if he had died or gone missing. Spooky stuff, to say the least. Looking at some old message boards, I saw that fans of the series had noticed a pretty significant shift in tone between MGS2 and MGS3. It was around this time that Kojima pulled a George Lucas and surrounded himself by yes-men, including Shuyo Murata, who took over on writing duties after Fukushima got sick of being played like a damn French horn. Most people don't know this, but Murata was actually the co-director of MGS4, meaning he was second in command at Kojima Productions from around 2005 to 2008. But if you look at MGS4's ending credits, which name is the only one you see under the director's spot?
Did you like it?
Now, I'm not saying Hideo Kojima doesn't have any talent. On the contrary, Kojima has tremendous talent. A talent for taking credit for other people's work. It's never made clear exactly how much his co-writers contributed, but the fact of the matter is that the Metal Gear Saga is the brainchild of several different people. And I know for a fact the majority of the narrative was constructed by people other than Kojima. In the credits for MGS5, look at all the people credited as writers. The story of MGS5 really isn't that complicated. In fact, it's one of the simpler games in the series. So why did there need to be that many people involved in the writing process?
Well, I'll tell you then.
It's because they've always been there. MGS5 was just the first time these collaborators came to light. If Kojima had the influence to make the co-director of MGS4 go uncredited, how many other names did he make disappear over the course of the series? But just for the sake of argument, let's say all those boring-ass codec conversations in MGS2 were all Kojima's idea. That's really not something anybody should be proud of.
A group of middle-aged Japanese ladies came up and asked me which building it was that King Kong was climbing in the movie. I said it was probably the Chrysler building, and then you showed up and started mouthing off. You were like, no, it's the Empire State. We started arguing, and I forgot all about the tourists. I was insisting that I was right.
When somebody sucks at making stuff, they tend to pile on layers to compensate for how much they suck. This person, usually a narcissist in love with the sound of their own voice, will show the abomination they created to people that suck even worse than they do. Not knowing what the fuck they're looking at, these people will confuse complexity for genius.
It's confusing, which means the show is daring and smart.
I call this the tiramisu paradox. You know that scene at the beginning of Superbad, where they're in home ec or whatever, and they're making tiramisu, but they don't know what the fuck they're doing? So dude's just like, you know what, just dump all the shit on there. And he looks at it and he's all proud of the Franken shit he created. That's exactly the same shit Kojima did with the Metal Gear series. It's actually really easy to make things complex when you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Putting something together with organized ideas that are concise and easy to understand, now that takes skill. As much as I'd like to keep explaining why shoddy work is the reason why we need to burn down the Church of Kojesus, that would just make me a hater, which I am. However, the real reason Kojima is such a bad person is because, well, it's because he's literally a bad person. I can't make this shit up. Everybody's familiar with the David Hayter fiasco. When people found out Kiefer Sutherland was replacing David Hayter as the voice of Snake, the majority of Metal Gear fans were outraged. What a lot of people weren't aware of, though, is that Kojima had been trying to replace Hayter ever since MGS3. Listen to this interview Hayter did with Game Informer back in 2016.
I was visiting the recording booth, the studio where we did Metal Gear 4 and Peace Walker, and one of the producers from Metal Gear was there that I know, and so I said, well, let's go grab a beer, and we went to grab a beer, and so I said, so I understand you're gearing up for Metal Gear, and he was like, yeah, and I said, okay, well, do you need me to do anything? Should we discuss the deal or whatever? He's like, no, we won't be needing you at the moment, so we'll let you know if anything changes. And that was basically it. So then I talked to Chris Zimmerman, and she said, yeah, we're going forward, but it looks like they're going to try to replace you. And so I was like, okay, well, let me know if that... Because they tried to do that before, and it never worked. They tried to get voice matches, and that never happened. So I said, okay, well, let me know if that doesn't work out, and I'll come back. And if not, I guess that's a pretty good run. It was annoying to me because I felt like I'd given a lot to the series, and I'd really helped promote it and been a big cheerleader for the whole thing. But at the same time, I genuinely feel that the run I had as Snake was remarkable, and you get that. If you get that once in your career, that's amazing. So I'm very happy with that as well. And I don't have any ill will towards Kiefer Sutherland or anything like that. The whole thing could have been handled better and a little more respectfully, but I'm not gonna cry about it. I had to re-audition. They made me re-audition for Metal Gear 3 to play Naked Snake. They made me re-audition to play Old Snake. And the whole time they were trying to find somebody else to do it. I heard that Kojima he asked one of the producers on Metal Gear 3 to ask Kurt Russell if he would take over for that game, but he didn't want to do it. And I don't know Kojima at all, really, but I never felt like he was a particularly big fan of mine. I don't think he liked the fact that I got a lot of attention for the role when he was meant to be the rock star of the whole thing. But that's just conjecture.
It's bad enough having to worry about being replaced by somebody doing their best impression of you, but when Kojima finally got his wish and Jack Bauer was brought in to play Snake, Hader wasn't even notified. He never got anything in the form of an explanation or even so much as a thank you. We're talking about a guy who sacrificed half of his paycheck to make sure that all of the original cast could return for the Metal Gear Solid remake. That's how much David Hayter cared about the Metal Gear series and its community of dedicated fans. Unlike Hideo Kojima. See, it turns out Kojima hates Metal Gear. The one thing he hates more than Metal Gear, though, is Metal Gear fans. After MGS1, gamers really wanted another chance to play as Snake. So what did Kojima do? He gave us Raiden. Then MGS3 was announced and people were like, hey, we're gonna get to play as Snake in this one, right? And Kojima was like, yeah, totally. Promise. Except no, it's Big Boss. And that actually turned out to be pretty good, but people still wanted to know what happened to Solid Snake after MGS2.
Alright, fine!
Kojima finally relented.
You want Solid Snake? Snake on this!
What the fuck happened? He's a fucked up old man with osteoporosis and a pedophile mustache. This isn't the Snake we deserve or the one we need right now.
Did you like it?
Another comment I get from Kojima zealots is that I have no right to criticize his work because, among other things, he doesn't owe me anything. First of all, yes, an artist does not owe you anything. The audience has no right to dictate the type of art that an artist creates. And video games are an art form the same way movies are. So to be disappointed when a game maker doesn't make the game you wanted them to make is... Actually, that's completely fucking normal! In fact, that's how the games industry has operated from the very beginning. Even if a game can be appreciated for its artistic merits, in the case of multi-million-dollar AAA games, its status as a piece of art is outweighed by the fact that it's also a product sold to a consumer for profit. And as a thing you fucking pay for, there's a consumer contract in place. With video games, a consumer contract is kind of an unspoken agreement between the publisher and the player. The player gives the publisher money and expects to get a quality game in return. If the product sucks monkey nuts, the publisher has essentially violated the consumer contract, meaning players are going to think twice about giving that publisher any money in the future. Because of that, it's in a game maker's best interest to give the customers what they want. This is where the term vote with your wallet comes from. You tell the publisher what kinds of games you want to see more of when you buy their shit. Imagine if you went into your local Tower Records to buy the latest Slayer tape. Also, it's 1987 for some reason. Shut up, just go with it. Anyway, the record label's been advertising this tape for months, and they assure you it's gonna be badass. Slayer! So you finally get the tape, and you put it in your fucking tricked out ass Walkman with fucking stickers on it and shit, and press the fucking play button. But then you notice something strange. The music starts playing and it turns out it's not Slayer, it's Motley fucking Crue. Now ain't that about a shitload of fuck? The record label tries to justify it by saying something stupid like,
did you like it?
But even if you actually like Motley Crue, that's just not what they told you were gonna be paying for. You're never gonna trust that record label to keep their promises in the future. Slayer! No! This is the type of shit that Kojima has pulled with every single Metal Gear game since MGS1. Whatever the fans want, Kojima's determined to give them the exact opposite. It's almost as if Kojima resents his success and the people that support him. Ironically though, it's like the more Kojima spits in the faces of his fans, the more money people throw at him. And the more promises he fails to deliver on, the more people call him a genius. If Peter Molyneux tried some shit like that, they'd burn his ass at the stake and you know it. With MGS2, Kojima made it clear that he'd rather make movies than games. He's dead set on becoming a filmmaker, but the way he goes about it is always at the expense of those that actually play video games. Don't get me wrong, MGS2 was and still is an amazing game, but it's not like you can just skip through the story. Good luck trying to play that game without the context that the cutscenes give you. Miss the wrong line of dialogue and suddenly you're left there thinking, wait a minute, why the fuck am I spray painting these sticks of butter? There's a reason why game developers didn't invest too much on cutscenes before MGS1. In the PlayStation era, pre-rendered cutscenes were used as a reward for reaching a certain milestone in the game's story. But even if a game had cutscenes rendered in the game engine, they were still kept to a minimum because they were seen as an obstacle to the gameplay. Cutscenes literally prevented you from playing the game. Then Kojima comes along and he's just like, oh, you like to play video games? Well, fuck you, here's 30 minutes of bullshit. What's kind of funny is that Kojima might actually be a competent filmmaker. You can't really tell because, like I said, his greatest talent is stealing other people's work, but just look at Death Stranding. If Death Stranding was like a series on Netflix or whatever, I wouldn't even be making this video. That shit looks amazing. Unfortunately, it's not a movie, it's a game. So when it finally came time to show gameplay to the world, what we got was... So now Kojima's making expensive-ass cutscenes with talented actors like Norman Reedus and Mads Mikkelsen, but the actual game is falling flat on its face. Man, I really hope Sony's got a backup plan in case this game tanks, because I don't see how anybody could make a return on this kind of investment. Speaking of investments, that's another talent Kojima has, spending other people's money. I'm not going to get into the fact that he thought it was okay to charge people $40 for a demo, because that's just going to give me a brain tumor, but I bet Konami was forced to do that after whatever the fuck this is. Ugh. In case people forgot or just didn't care, before we found out that Ground Zeroes was nothing but an overglorified demo disc, Kojima was allowed to construct a fake game developer called Moby Dick Studio to tease the reveal of MGS5. Every step was taken to trick people into thinking these guys were legit. Copyrights were filed, web domains were purchased, and a Swedish actor, or at least a dude with a funny accent, was hired to play the studio's CEO, Joakim Mogren. Unfortunately for Kojima's ego, some people immediately figured out that Joakim was an anagram for Kojima, then the whole thing was blown wide open. Unwilling to admit that he's not as clever as he thinks he is, Kojima kept the gag running for a few more weeks, which resulted in a flood of hilarious conspiracy theories. Because even though everybody knew it was MGS5, nobody could fathom all the time and money that was being spent on what was essentially a big-ass April Fool's prank. In the end, it didn't do anything for MGS5's marketing campaign, it was just a really expensive waste of everybody's fucking time. That's probably one of the reasons why Kojima was fired by Konami. Kojima's boss probably sat him down and was like, look man, we're not Capcom, there's no way we can justify expenses like this to our shareholders. Then Kojima came back at him, right? He was like,
did you like it?
Faced with that, what other choice did Konami have? Before you get on my case about all the Geneva Conventions Konami violated when they were restructuring, yeah, I know, it's a tragedy. But Kojima had enough power and influence that he could have saved a lot of people from losing their jobs. Instead, because he was unwilling to compromise, Konami had no choice but to disband Kojima Productions entirely. I get the sense Kojima's trying to end his career on purpose, maybe because he still can't make the kinds of games he really wants to. Imagine if Kojima tried to do a low-budget indie project. You think anybody would even take him seriously? After he climbed out from under the pile of death threats, the industry would laugh in his face. This is what I call the Superman conundrum. See, if something goes wrong in Metropolis, they don't pray to Avalokiteshvara like everybody else. No, they pray to Superman. And even though Superman is the strongest creature in the galaxy, no matter how powerful he is, it's still impossible for him to save everybody. But Superman can't ever show any weakness or make it seem like he might not be up to the task he's been charged with. If Superman ever failed to save Mianus, Connecticut from total destruction, the rest of the world would collapse under the sheer weight of that realization. Because if the greatest hero to ever exist still isn't good enough, what's the point of even trying? This is the situation Kojima's been put in. You know, when I think of it like that, it's like, what if this whole time he's been trying to ruin his own name so people wouldn't expect as much from him? It's kind of sad. I mean, working for some mega corporation where you're treated like cattle, your every thought and idea harvested like meat at a slaughterhouse? Just to survive in that kind of environment, I mean, you'd have to betray or outright abandon everyone and everything you ever valued. You'd inevitably wind up bitter and alone, left to ponder everything you lost in the pursuit of your accomplishments. Psych! I took that last line from a page on TV Tropes. Look, even if Kojima was being exploited by Konami or Sony, your shitty past isn't an excuse to be a shitty person. If you don't want to be held in such a high regard, there's no need to shit on other people's careers on your way out. Check this out. In March of 2015, Kotaku published an article listing each time Kojima said he was going to stop making Metal Gear games. All the way back in 2000, Kojima said he wanted someone else to direct the next Metal Gear. And during the development of every Metal Gear since, he swore up and fucking down that it would be his last one. It got to the point where, while he was working on Peace Walker, Kojima said this in an interview with Kotaku's Steven Totilo. If you write that Kojima-san doesn't have to make Metal Gear anymore every day on Kotaku, and write to the CEO of Konami and tell him that, then it might be easier for me to make non-Metal Gear games. From that, you might assume that Kojima despised the fact that Konami forced him to keep making Metal Gear, right? I don't fucking think so. Okay, so remember Portable Ops? Unlike unofficial entries in the series like Metal Gear Acid or Snake's Revenge, MPO was explicitly made to be a canonical entry in the series. And it did an amazing job of filling in some of the gaps in the story between MGS3 and the original Metal Gear. For the first time, we had an entry in the Metal Gear series directed by someone other than Kojima. He still acted as a producer for the game though, meaning he worked side by side with the writer and director to make sure the game stayed true to the Metal Gear mythos. After Portable Ops was released, it did well enough critically and commercially that Konami released an expansion about a year later. Finally, we had undeniable proof that Kojima wasn't the secret to Metal Gear's success. They didn't need him anymore. He could finally be free to work on other shit. Kojima didn't like the idea that somebody else could do his job, so he decided to shit all over the hard work of the Portable Ops development team. In an interview with Jeff Keighley back in 2014, Keighley asked Kojima straight up if MPO was canon or not. Kojima responded that he makes a distinction between games that he directed and games that he produced.
これは難しいですか。僕はプロデューサーだったんで、当然企画内容も見てますけど、自分で書いたストーリーではないので、なんでしょうね。細かいところを言うと、メタルギアサーガからそれてるところがかなりの、ありまして、なのでなんて言うんでしょうね、ストーリーライン的には、サーガの中に入ってますけど、細かいところで言うと、ちょっと、本流からはそれてるような感じです。メインかどうかっていうよりも、僕が監督脚本ゲームデザインをしたそのヒデオ・コジマゲームっていうのと、僕がプロデュースしたものを僕の中では分けて表現しているっていう感じです。
I can't think of a reason why he felt the need to say all that. Besides him being an egotistical piece of shit, of course. And it's frustrating for fans of the Metal Gear series that actually follow the story. MGS4, despite attempting to fill all the plot holes left in the series with nanomachines, still left fans with tons of unanswered questions about Big Boss's history. These questions could have been easily answered in Peace Walker or The Phantom Pain, but Kojima chose to create even more confusion by giving us an explanation to a problem that literally nobody cared about. Who the fuck gives a shit why Big Boss was still alive in Metal Gear 2? That game wasn't even released outside Japan until 2006! Every once in a while, I get comments from people criticizing me for missing the point of MGS5's ending. These complete idiots explain that Kojima was telling fans to stop looking into Metal Gear's backstory for answers, and instead just accept the fact that the player is Snake, or Big Boss, or whom the fuck ever. Supposedly, we shouldn't focus on the characters and events of the games. Instead, we should pay attention to the overall messages and themes. Psst, hey, guess what? If that's really what Kojima wanted people to get out of MGS5's piece of shit ending, it sounds a lot like he's trying to cover up all the mistakes he made in trying to tell a cohesive fucking story. If you're trying to make a series of games where the plot isn't super important, the one thing you wouldn't do is link all the games with an interconnected narrative, even going so far as to include a timeline at the end of each game so people can keep track of everything. Now, if only there was a good example of a huge franchise with a ton of sequels where none of the games were related to each other in any significant way. That way you don't have to remember plot details between games. Now I wonder what something like that would look like. Let's face it, Kojima's a fuck-up. Plain and simple, that's what he is. But so are most people. It's time everybody realized that Kojima's just your average run-of-the-mill waste of space, same as 90% of the population. The ones that are really fucking up, though, are the ones that defend him like I used to when he intentionally does stupid shit. That's unacceptable. The video game industry can't support itself if this kind of behavior goes unchallenged. Just look at Sean Murray. Murray made a couple promises about No Man's Sky, and when he couldn't deliver, he disappeared like he had to go into the witness protection program. Hideo Kojima needs to be held to the same standard.
You can't keep getting away with it!
He can't keep getting away with it!
Did you like it?